From the moment the studio lights flared to life and the audience erupted in applause, no one, not the producers, not the fans, not even Ellen herself, had any idea that today's episode would spiral into the kind of chaos people still whisper about. It started like any other sunny day on the Ellen show set, until it didn't. What looked like a harmless celebrity visit quickly twisted into something far more explosive, the kind of drama that makes fans clutch their seats and gasp, "Did that really just happen?" Rumors had been circulating for weeks about tensions brewing behind the scenes, but no one expected it to burst open right in front of millions of viewers. And yet, that's exactly what happened. One celebrity guest walked onto the stage with a smile plastered on their face, but underneath that smile was a storm waiting to break. Within minutes, playful banter turned razor-sharp. Compliments turned into cutting remarks. And as emotions ran high, the audience watched in stunned silence as Ellen's expression shifted from amused to shocked to downright speechless. By the time the cameras cut to commercial, fans were already flooding social media with frantic posts, convinced they had just witnessed the biggest on-air meltdown in the show's history. When the cameras came back from the first commercial break, the energy in the studio felt strangely unstable, like everyone could sense that something big was about to happen but no one could quite name it yet. Ellen gave her signature grin, wide and inviting, but even that seemed to tremble a little at the corners. Maybe she felt it too, that simmering tension lingering beneath the studio lights. The audience cheered as the next guest stepped out, the applause echoing through the room with a kind of hopeful excitement. Fans expected a funny exchange, maybe a harmless prank, or a little teasing back and forth. But from the very first moment the guest walked out, something in their expression hinted that today's conversation would go nowhere near the usual lighthearted vibe. So, Ellen began, shifting slightly in her chair as the guest settled into theirs. "You've had a pretty busy year. Tours, awards, new projects, do you even sleep?" she chuckled, expecting an easy laugh from the guest. But instead, the guest let out a cold, clipped little laugh that made a few people in the front row blink. "Oh, I sleep fine," they said. "I just don't get ambushed with forced kindness the moment I wake up." Ellen blinked, unsure if she heard that right. The audience gave a shaky giggle, assuming it was a joke, though a weird one. The guest leaned forward, eyes locked on Ellen with a seriousness that felt out of place on set. "Yeah," they said, "forced kindness. That's kind of your thing, isn't it?" Ellen's smile froze. What do you mean?" she tried, brushing it off with another laugh. But the guest didn't let it go. "Oh come on, Ellen," they said, waving a hand dismissively. "Everyone knows how it works here. Fake laughs, fake generosity, fake surprises. You pretend everything is sunshine and rainbows, and if anyone doesn't play along, you look at them like they've ruined your whole brand." A small gasp rippled through the audience. Even the cameraman seemed to hesitate, unsure if he should zoom in or pan away. Ellen straightened in her seat, her fingers curling subtly around the armrest. "I'm not sure where this is coming from," she said, still trying to keep her voice light. "We're just having a conversation." "Are we?" the guest shot back. "Because it feels more like I'm being interviewed by someone who thinks she can talk her way out of anything. Someone who's used to being in control." Ellen's jaw tensed for a moment, just a flicker, barely visible, but enough for fans watching at home to freeze the frame later and analyze it like detectives. The tension was unmistakable now, thick like humid air before a thunderstorm. "Well," Ellen said softly, "I didn't realize we had a problem." The guest leaned back, crossing their arms. "You didn't have to realize. You just had to listen. Like today, for example. Your team said we'd be talking about my charity project. But now you're steering things toward jokes, toward your usual little comedy routine. It's like you can't help making everything about you." The audience was silent. Utterly silent. Even the hum of machinery in the background sounded louder than usual. Ellen tried again. "This is a talk show, you know. We try to keep things fun." "Sometimes things aren't fun," the guest snapped before she could finish. "Sometimes people come on here because they want to talk about something meaningful, not be turned into a punchline." Ellen's eyes narrowed, but only slightly. The guest clearly wasn't finished. "You know what really bothers me?" they continued. "The way you pretend to be everyone's best friend. Like you know them, like you understand their lives, their struggles. But most of the time, you barely do your research. You skim a few notes before the show and act like you care." Ellen's microphone picked up the softest inhale from her, one that sent a quiet shock down the backs of several producers watching nervously from behind the cameras. A whisper passed among them, asking if they should cut to break, but the director, wide-eyed, shook his head. The drama was too big. The moment was too intense. They had to keep rolling. Ellen forced a smile again, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I think you're being unfair," she said. "I care about every guest who comes on this show." The guest tilted their head, then looked directly into one of the cameras, breaking the invisible barrier. "Fans," they said, voice steady, "I know you love her. I know you think she's sweet and relatable. But maybe it's time to stop falling for the act." A ripple of shock spread across the entire studio. Some audience members glanced nervously at each other, unsure if they were witnessing the collapse of something iconic. Others leaned forward, eating up every second like it was the juiciest plot twist in a reality show. Ellen swallowed hard. "You're saying I'm fake?" "I'm saying," the guest replied, "that you've built a brand on pretending to be someone you're not. And a lot of us are tired of it." The silence that followed felt heavier than anything that had come before. Even Ellen, who had made a career out of navigating unpredictable guests, seemed genuinely thrown off. "You know," Ellen finally said, her voice quieter now, "if you felt this way, you could have talked to me privately." "And what?" the guest said. "You'd laugh, make a joke, brush it off on camera later?" "No, if I'm going to say this, I'm saying it where everyone can hear it." Ellen's expression faltered, and something softened in her eyes, not vulnerability exactly, but a flicker of realization that the conversation was slipping away from her control. For the first time, she looked almost small under the blinding studio lights. But before she could respond, someone else from backstage, another celebrity guest scheduled to appear later, walked onto the set unexpectedly, expression tense and full of warning. The audience murmured in confusion, sensing that this surprise entrance wasn't part of the show. Ellen glanced at them, eyebrows raised. "What are you doing here?" she asked. And the second celebrity said, voice low but trembling with intensity, "I think it's time someone else said what they've been afraid to say." And just like that, the entire audience leaned forward in their seats, breath held, waiting for the next bomb to drop. The second celebrity stepped fully onto the stage, their footsteps echoing through the quiet studio as if the sound itself carried tension. The audience shifted in their seats, whispering nervously, clearly unsure whether to clap, gasp, or just stay frozen. Ellen blinked in surprise, her composure slipping a little more with each passing second. The sight of an unscheduled guest walking into the middle of the show was rare, shocking, and undeniably dramatic. The first guest smirked slightly, as if they'd been expecting this. "Well," they said under their breath, "look who finally decided to speak up." Ellen frowned, sitting forward. "You're not supposed to be out here yet," she said to the second guest, her voice tight but calm. "This isn't your segment." The second guest shook their head. "I don't care," they said. "I've been watching backstage, and honestly, I've wanted to say something for a long time." Ellen blinked again, visibly thrown off. "About what?" The second guest crossed their arms tightly, like they were bracing themselves for what was about to unfold. "About you," they said. "About the way you treat people. About the things you say off camera. About the way everyone is expected to laugh at your jokes even when they aren't funny." The audience gasped. Not the playful gasp they usually gave when Ellen pulled off a silly prank or delivered a clever punchline. This was a sharp, painful gasp. A real one. One that said they were genuinely stunned. Ellen opened her mouth as if to respond but stopped. She closed it again, gathering herself. "This isn't fair," she said after a long pause. "I don't know what you think you saw or heard, but I treat everyone here with respect." The second guest let out a frustrated breath. "Ellen, I've been on this show 3 times. 3. And each time, you made some joke about my personal life that you knew I wasn't comfortable with. Your producers told you beforehand. I told you myself. But you still did it. You always do. And you always laugh like it's harmless. Ellen looked away, her fingers tapping anxiously against her knee. I can't remember every detail about every guest, she said quietly. But isn't that the point? The first guest interjected sharply. You act like you know us. Like you understand us. But you don't. You make these jokes that look cute on camera, but backstage? We're left wondering why you can't just be normal for 5 minutes. For a moment, Ellen seemed genuinely lost. Her eyes darted between the two guests, then toward the audience, who were now watching her with equal parts confusion and discomfort. The atmosphere felt heavy, almost suffocating, like the studio air had thickened. Ellen attempted a laugh, though it sounded brittle. Look, I think this is all being blown way out of proportion. Whatever misunderstandings we've had, we could have worked them out privately. Privately? The second guest repeated, raising an eyebrow. Ellen, I tried that. Last year. After the episode aired. Do you remember? Ellen hesitated. I don't know. Exactly, the guest said. You don't remember because it didn't matter to you. I told you I was hurt, and you told me to lighten up because your viewers thought the joke was hilarious. The audience murmured again, but this time, the tone had shifted. It wasn't just shock anymore. It was curiosity. Suspicion. A creeping doubt that maybe, just maybe, the bubbly, cheerful host they adored wasn't as perfect as she appeared. Ellen swallowed hard, then turned back to the first guest. Did you plan this? She asked quietly. The first guest shrugged innocently. Plan? No, but I'm not going to pretend I haven't wanted to say these things for a long time. This is ridiculous, Ellen muttered under her breath, barely loud enough for the microphone to catch it. The second guest pulled in a breath, their expression torn between frustration and exhaustion. Ellen, this isn't about attacking you. It's about being honest. People think you're this sweet, understanding person. But sometimes you aren't. Sometimes you say things that hurt people, and nobody talks about it because they think you're untouchable. Ellen's eyes flashed for a second, a glimpse of something fiercer than her usual on-camera softness. I'm not untouchable, she said. I'm a person. I make mistakes. Sure, the first guest replied, but the problem is that you act like you don't. Like everything is a joke to you. Like people should just laugh their pain away because you said something funny. Ellen looked down at her hands. For a few seconds, she didn't say a word. The silence stretched across the room, long and aching. Then, from the side of the stage, another figure emerged, this time one of Ellen's longtime producers. The audience stirred again, their nerves building as they wondered how much more chaotic the moment could get. The producer approached cautiously. Ellen, they whispered, leaning toward her ear but still close enough for the cameras to pick up the murmur, maybe we should cut. Ellen shook her head sharply. No, she whispered back. If we cut now, it'll look worse. The producer stepped back, reluctant but obedient. Ellen exhaled, then looked at the two guests. Fine, she said. If you have something to say, say it. The second guest lifted their chin. You know what? I will. Last time I was here, you made a joke about my family. You remember that one, right? The clip went viral. Millions of views. Everyone thought it was hilarious. Ellen's eyes tightened. That was just a joke. You know that. But it wasn't just a joke to me, the guest said, voice cracking for the first time. My family wasn't laughing. My mother called me crying. And I told you afterward not to do it again. Ellen's breath caught, but she didn't speak. Then when I came back the following season, you brought it up again, the guest continued. You said you couldn't resist. Do you know how humiliating that was? Ellen tried to respond, but her voice wavered. I didn't think it would upset you that much. And that's the problem, the guest whispered. You never think it'll upset anyone. Because you think everyone's just playing along with your style. But maybe some of us are just tired. Tired of pretending it's fine. The first guest nodded. And tired of being treated like we don't have boundaries. Ellen sat back, looking like someone who had been pushed into a corner she never expected to stand in. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. The audience watched, stunned, as the tension continued to throb through the room like a slow, heavy pulse. And just when it seemed like things were as bad as they could get, a voice from the audience suddenly shouted, trembling with emotion, "Ellen, is any of this true?" Ellen looked up sharply, eyes wide. The studio fell silent again, deeper than before, like everyone was holding their breath at once. Ellen opened her mouth to speak, but before a single word came out, something happened backstage. A loud crash. A startled shout. The kind of noise that sent a ripple of panic through the crew. Ellen flinched, turning her head toward the sound. And the audience, already stretched thin from the rising tension, collectively leaned forward again, sensing that the drama was far from over. Not even close. The crash backstage echoed like a thunderclap through the studio, and suddenly every head in the audience snapped toward the wings. Ellen stiffened, eyes wide, as the producers scrambled behind the cameras, whispering frantically into headsets. The first guest and second guest exchanged a look, one that carried a strange mix of worry and something else, something like grim inevitability. It was as if they knew the situation was spiraling even faster than they had planned, or maybe faster than anyone had planned. Ellen, breath shaky, stood from her chair. "What was that?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, though the tremor underneath it was impossible to hide. No one answered her immediately. Instead, a stagehand rushed out from the wings, slightly out of breath, eyes darting between Ellen and the guests. They said softly, "We have a situation." Ellen frowned. "What kind of situation?" The stagehand hesitated, clearly unsure how much to reveal in front of a studio full of people and rolling cameras. "Someone else is here," they finally whispered. Ellen blinked. "Someone else? Who?" Before the stagehand could answer, another figure stepped onto the stage, this time moving slowly, deliberately, with an expression full of tension that sent another shiver through the crowd. It was a third celebrity, one who hadn't been scheduled for the show at all, someone whose presence made the audience gasp louder than before. Even the two guests on stage looked startled, though the first guest's eyes flickered with a hint of recognition. The third celebrity stopped at the center of the stage, staring at Ellen with a look so intense that the already fragile atmosphere seemed to crack. "Ellen," they said, voice low but clear, "we need to talk. Publicly." Ellen's whole body seemed to freeze. "You weren't even invited," she said, trying to laugh, but the sound came out hollow. "What are you doing here?" The third celebrity ignored the question. "I heard what they were saying," they said, gesturing toward the first two guests. "And I couldn't just sit back anymore. I've kept quiet for long enough." Ellen looked stunned, even a little betrayed. "You too," she whispered. "Yes," the third guest replied, and the pain in their voice made the audience shift uncomfortably. "Me too." The tension in the room seemed to solidify, like a thick fog that no one could wade through. Ellen sank back into her chair, visibly overwhelmed. The cameras were still rolling, the audience silent, the air buzzing with a mixture of disbelief, curiosity, and raw anticipation. The third guest took a shaky breath. "Do you remember the last time I was here?" they asked. Ellen swallowed. "Of course I do," she said, though the uncertainty in her voice hinted that the memory was a blur. "You made fun of something deeply personal," the third guest continued. "You turned something I trusted you with into a joke for the world to laugh at. And I laughed along because I didn't want to seem dramatic. I didn't want to look like I couldn't take a joke from America's sweetheart, but after that episode aired, I was flooded with messages. People mocking me. People repeating your joke like it was a punchline they owned now." Ellen's expression cracked, guilt flickering across her face. I didn't realize the impact," she said softly. You never do, the first guest interjected. That's the point. The audience murmured, their loyalty now tugged in conflicting directions. Some stared at Ellen with disbelief, others with sympathy, and some with a devastating mix of both. Fans watching from home would later say they felt like they were witnessing the unraveling of something that had been tightly held together for years. Ellen ran her hands through her hair, something she rarely did on camera. The gesture looked desperate. Human. Why are you all doing this now? She asked, voice breaking slightly. Why pile on like this? The third guest shook their head. Because every time one of us spoke up privately, you brushed it off. Or you laughed. Or you told us not to take things so seriously. But when we watched each other go through the same pattern, it became impossible to ignore. Ellen's eyes darted toward the back of the stage, where producers were watching helplessly. I didn't mean to hurt any of you, she whispered. I was just trying to entertain people. Entertain, the second guest said quietly, shouldn't come at the cost of someone else's dignity. Ellen looked at them, something tightening in her chest. But you all came back to the show, she said, voice wavering. You didn't have to. We came back, the second guest said, because everyone does. Because people want to believe things will be different. Because it's hard to say no when you're told it's good for your career. But that doesn't mean the hurt magically disappears. The third guest stepped closer to Ellen, softening just slightly. Nobody wants to destroy you. We just want honesty. Accountability. A moment where you actually listen instead of laughing things off. Ellen sat silently for a moment, staring down at the floor. When she looked up again, her eyes were wet, not enough for tears to fall, but enough for the audience to notice. I'm listening, she whispered. There was a long pause, heavy with meaning. The audience held its breath. Even the cameras seemed to hum quieter, as if the machinery itself was leaning in. The first guest sighed. Good, they said. Because there's something else. Ellen stiffened. Something else? The second guest nodded. Something we didn't mention yet. The third guest looked uneasy now too, as if they weren't entirely comfortable with what was about to be revealed. Ellen's heart seemed to pound visibly beneath her sweater. What is it? She asked, trying not to sound afraid. The first guest exchanged a look with the others. Then they spoke. We weren't the only ones who felt mistreated, they said quietly. There's someone else who wanted to speak today. Someone you probably didn't expect. Ellen went pale. Who? There was a sudden rustle from backstage. A figure hesitated just beyond the curtain, their silhouette visible for only a moment. The audience gasped again, even louder than before. The murmur rolled through the room like a wave. Ellen's breath hitched. No, she whispered. Please tell me it's not. And then the fourth person stepped out. They weren't another celebrity. They weren't a producer. They weren't part of the crew. They were someone who used to work closely with Ellen, someone who had once been a beloved part of the show, someone fans had wondered about for years after their sudden disappearance. The audience erupted, whispers, gasps, shock, disbelief. Ellen stared at the person in pure astonishment, her voice barely audible. You came back, she whispered. The person stared back, eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. I had to, they said softly. There are things the world needs to hear. The stage fell into a silence so deep it felt like the entire building had stopped breathing. And then the fourth person took a step forward, ready to expose secrets no one had ever expected to hear on live television. And the drama, impossibly, was about to escalate even further. The fourth person stood at the center of the stage, the lights glinting off their eyes, which held a mixture of grief, anger, and a quiet determination that sent shivers through everyone in the studio. Ellen sat frozen, unable to find her words. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every second, every twitch of facial expression, every subtle gesture. Cameras circled slowly, capturing each fleeting moment as if aware that history, or at least a televised legend, was being made in real time. Ellen, the person began, voice firm but trembling slightly, I worked with you for years. Years. And I've never said a word like this publicly because I believed in you. I believed in the show. But what happened here today, it changed everything. Ellen swallowed hard, fingers tightening on the arms of her chair. I don't know what you mean, she said, voice shaky. The fourth person shook their head. Oh, I think you do. Every joke, every offhand comment, every smile at someone else's expense. You think it's all harmless. That it's just entertainment. But behind the cameras, behind the lights, people are hurt. And for years, I've carried that hurt for you. For us. For everyone who trusted you. The audience was completely captivated. Even the two guests who had already confronted Ellen earlier leaned forward, mouths slightly open, as if hearing a layer of truth they had never considered before. Whispers ran through the crowd. The energy was thick, electric, almost tangible. Ellen's eyes welled up, and she whispered, I didn't realize it was this bad. You didn't realize? The fourth person said, voice rising, not in anger but in disbelief. Ellen, do you hear yourself? You didn't realize? We told you. Some of us pleaded privately, others tried subtly. But you always laughed it off. Brushed it aside. Today, it's public. Today, everyone sees what it's like to be on the receiving end of your so-called humor. The first guest leaned in. Exactly. Today isn't just about our experiences. It's about the system you've created. The way people feel pressured to smile, to perform happiness, to laugh even when it hurts. Ellen looked down at her hands. The usual confidence, the sparkling charm that had defined her career, seemed absent. She looked vulnerable, small, and painfully human. The second guest added quietly, fans are shocked, Ellen. They can feel the tension. They can feel the emotions running high. They're realizing maybe the show isn't always what they thought it was. The fourth person stepped closer. And the hardest part? The family was left divided. The staff, the longtime collaborators, even the audience sometimes. People who believed in you, who supported you, they've been questioning their loyalty. Wondering if their admiration was misplaced. That's why we're here today. To tell the truth. Ellen's voice cracked. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I really didn't. Intentions aren't enough, the first guest said. Actions matter. Words matter. Smiles matter. What you think is harmless can be devastating. And it's time you face that. The fourth person's eyes softened, and the voice lowered. But we're not here to destroy you. We're here because we believe you can do better. Because we hope you can listen, really listen, and start changing things. The studio remained silent. The tension had transformed from explosive anger to something more fragile, more reflective. The audience seemed to hold its collective breath, unsure whether to cheer, cry, or just continue watching as history unfolded. Ellen finally spoke, voice trembling but sincere. I hear you. I hear all of you. I didn't understand how my words and actions affected so many people. And for that, I'm truly sorry. A murmur ran through the audience. Some clapped quietly, tentative at first, then louder. Others simply nodded, taking in the rawness of the moment. Even the guests seemed to relax slightly, their tension softening but not disappearing entirely. We wanted you to understand, the fourth person said gently, that apology is the start, but not enough. Actions speak louder than words. Ellen nodded, tears spilling over, finally letting herself feel the weight of the moment. I know. And I promise, I'll do better. I'll be better. The first guest smiled faintly. Fans are shocked, emotions ran high, but maybe this is a turning point. The second guest added, and maybe now the family, the cast, the crew, the audience, they can see that real change is possible. Ellen wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. Thank you for being honest. For speaking up. For giving me the chance to learn. The fourth person gave a small nod. We hope the fans will see this, too. That they'll understand that behind every joke, every show, every smiling face, there are real people. With real feelings. The audience began to applaud. Softly at first, then louder, building into a wave of sound that filled the studio. Ellen smiled, though it was different now. Softer, more human. Not the sparkling, untouchable grin from the opening segment, but something earned through confrontation, vulnerability, and raw honesty. The first guest stood, offering Ellen a small hand. We can move forward, they said. But only if the truth continues. Ellen took the hand, squeezing it gently. We will. I promise. The second guest stepped closer. Fans are still talking, they said, but maybe now they'll see what it really takes to be genuine. To face mistakes and grow. The fourth person nodded. And maybe this is a lesson for everyone. In entertainment, in life. Honesty is difficult, confrontation is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Ellen looked around the studio, at the crew, the audience, the cameras, the guests. Her voice broke slightly, but it was steady. I want to change. I want to do better. And I want to make this right. The audience erupted again, louder this time. The energy shifted from tension to hope. The drama had reached its climax, the chaos had run its course, and while the scars of the confrontation would remain, there was a sense that something new had begun, a chance for honesty, reconciliation, and growth. As the cameras panned across the studio, capturing every reaction, every tear, every subtle nod, it became clear, today's episode would be remembered forever. Not just as a confrontation, but as a turning point. A moment when emotions ran high, families, real and extended, felt the tension of truth, and one of television's most iconic figures faced the reality behind the smile. And though the story might continue behind the cameras, for this moment, for this broadcast, the drama had reached a resolution that was imperfect, messy, and utterly human. So, what do you think about everything that just went down on set? Were Ellen and the guests right to air all these grievances in front of millions, or should some things have stayed behind closed doors? Fans are shocked, emotions ran high, and the family was left divided, but this could mark the start of a new chapter. We want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell us who you think handled the drama best. If you enjoyed this wild, behind-the-scenes look at the tension, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more unbelievable stories, and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment of the chaos, surprises, and juicy reveals we bring straight to your screen. Your opinion matters, and we can't wait to see what you think.